No one has ever seen God, the only Son, who is himself God, and is at the Father's side. He has made him known. These words from John 1:18 form a profound bridge between the mystery of God and the revelation of Jesus Christ. To understand how Jesus makes God known, we must journey through the ancient longings of humanity, the unique claims of Christ, and the transformative implications for those who seek to know God today. Since the dawn of human awareness, people have gazed upward, searching for meaning, for purpose, and for signs of the divine. The invisible God has stirred the hearts of poets, prophets, and philosophers alike. Ancient Israel, in particular, was steeped in the awe and reverence of a God who dwelt in unapproachable light, a God whose presence was signaled by cloud and fire, whose voice thundered from Sinai, and whose glory filled the temple with such intensity that none could look upon him and live. The Hebrew Scriptures record the consistent refrain, "No one may see me and live." To encounter God in his fullness was to be overwhelmed by holiness, purity, and otherness beyond comprehension. Yet amidst this mystery, the longing persisted. Could God be known? Not merely inferred, not simply imagined, but truly seen and understood? The opening lines of the Gospel of John answer this longing in a way no previous text had dared. No one has ever seen God, John writes, affirming the ancient truth of God's invisibility and transcendence. But then he continues, "The only Son, who is himself God and is at the Father's side, he has made him known." Here, the impossible becomes possible. God is revealed not by human searching, but by divine initiative. The invisible God makes himself visible in Jesus Christ. To grasp what this means, we must carefully consider each part of John's declaration. First, no one has ever seen God. Throughout the Old Testament, encounters with God were always veiled. Moses, the greatest of the prophets, was permitted only to see God's back as he passed by. Elijah heard a still, small voice. Isaiah was undone by a vision of God's holiness. These glimpses were partial and always mediated. The fullness of God's essence remained shrouded in mystery. Then comes the phrase, "the only Son, who is himself God." Here, John introduces us to the breathtaking claim at the heart of the Christian faith. Jesus is not merely a messenger or a prophet, not simply a wise teacher or a moral example. He is the unique, one-of-a-kind Son, himself God, begotten from the very heart of the Father. The language is intimate, at the Father's side, conveying closeness, unity, and shared being. Jesus is, in the words of the earlier verses, the Word who was with God and was God, through whom all things were made. But why does this matter for the question of knowing God? Because it is precisely this unique relationship, the Son, who is himself God and eternally at the Father's side, that qualifies Jesus to make God known. He is not an outsider reporting on God from a distance. He is the divine insider, revealing the Father from perfect knowledge and perfect unity. When John says, "He has made him known," the Greek word used is exegesato, from which we get the English word exegesis, to explain, to interpret, to unfold meaning. Jesus is the exegesis of God. He is the one who interprets and reveals God's character, will, and heart. Every word he speaks, every action he takes, every moment of his life is a living exposition of who God is. But how does Jesus make God known? First, he does so through his teaching. Time and again, Jesus speaks of God not as a distant deity, but as Father, Abba, a term of intimacy and trust. He reveals a God who cares for the lilies and the sparrows, who knows every hair on our heads, who welcomes prodigals and forgives sinners. Through his parables and sermons, Jesus paints a portrait of God as just and merciful, holy and compassionate. Second, Jesus reveals God through his actions. He touches lepers, eats with tax collectors, heals the blind, and raises the dead. In every encounter, he demonstrates the love, power, and purity of God. He does not merely speak about God, he embodies God's presence. As he tells Philip, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." The invisible becomes visible in flesh and blood. Third, and most profoundly, Jesus makes God known through his death and resurrection. On the cross, the deepest mystery of God's love is unveiled. Here, the holiness of God confronts human sin, and the mercy of God triumphs over judgment. In the resurrection, the power of God over death and evil is displayed for all to see. The Gospel writers insist that in these events, we see the heart of God revealed, self-giving love, justice, and victory. Yet, the revelation of God in Jesus is not merely informational, it is relational and transformative. To know God through Jesus is not simply to acquire facts about the divine, but to enter into a living relationship. Jesus invites his followers not just to observe, but to participate, to become children of God, to share in the life and love that he shares with the Father. This is why John declares, "To all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God." Knowing God, according to John, is personal and participatory, rooted in trust and love. But John 1:18 also challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about God. Many imagine God as distant, detached, or unknowable. Others picture God as harsh, demanding, or arbitrary. Still others search for God in mystical experiences or philosophical speculation. John's Gospel insists that the definitive revelation of God is found in the person of Jesus Christ. If we want to know what God is like, we must look to Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God, the radiance of the Father's glory, the exact imprint of his nature. This has profound implications. It means that all our images of God must be measured against the life, teaching, and self-sacrifice of Christ. If our conception of God does not match the character of Jesus, his mercy, his truth, his justice, his humility, then our image is incomplete or distorted. In Jesus, we see a God who stoops to serve, who weeps over suffering, who confronts evil, and who lays down his life for his friends. Moreover, the fact that no one has ever seen God, but that Jesus has made him known, keeps us humble. It reminds us that we do not discover God by our own wisdom or effort. We receive revelation as a gift. God remains greater than our minds can fathom, but he is not unknowable. He has bridged the gap in Christ. The early church wrestled with these truths, seeking language to express the mystery. The creeds speak of Jesus as God from God, light from light, true God from true God. Theologians coined the term incarnation to describe how the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Artists painted icons of Christ as the window through which the light of God shines. Mystics meditated on the wounds of Christ as the doorway to the heart of God. Yet, this is not merely ancient theology, it is living reality for believers today. To encounter Jesus in the pages of the Gospels, in the sacraments, in prayer, and in the community of faith is to encounter the living God. Jesus does not simply point the way to God, he is the way. He does not merely teach about the truth, he is the truth. He does not just promise life, he is the life. In his presence, the unknowable becomes known, the distant becomes near, the mysterious becomes intimate. Consider the implications for our daily lives. If God is as Jesus reveals, then God is approachable. We can come with our questions, our doubts, our wounds, and our hopes. We do not need to climb a spiritual ladder or achieve perfection before drawing near. The God revealed in Jesus welcomes the broken and the seeking, the humble and the honest. If God is as Jesus reveals, then God is trustworthy. In a world filled with shifting shadows and unreliable promises, the God who keeps covenant, who forgives enemies, who sacrifices himself for others, is a God we can rely on. In Jesus, God's faithfulness is not an abstract concept, but a lived reality. If God is as Jesus reveals, then God is calling us to transformation. To know God is to be changed, drawn out of self-centeredness into love, out of fear into faith, out of darkness into light. As we behold the glory of God in the face of Christ, we are invited to become more like him, reflecting his character in our own lives. But this knowledge is not for us alone. The revelation of God in Christ compels us to share the good news. If in Jesus, God's heart for the world is revealed, then we are called to embody that same love, justice, and mercy in our relationships, communities, and world. We become, in a sense, living witnesses, those who, having encountered the living God in Christ, point others to the same encounter. John's words, then, are both a declaration and an invitation. No one has ever seen God. The mystery remains. But the only Son, who is himself God and is at the Father's side, has made him known. The invisible has become visible. The unknowable has spoken. The distant has drawn near. In Jesus, God is not a puzzle to be solved, but a person to be encountered. The journey does not end here. The rest of John's Gospel unfolds the many ways Jesus reveals the Father, through signs and wonders, through suffering and glory, through words that comfort and challenge. The invitation is to step into that story, to listen, to watch, to follow, and to receive the life that Jesus offers. In conclusion, John 1:18 stands as a cornerstone of Christian faith and hope. It affirms the transcendence and mystery of God. No one has ever seen God, but it shatters the barrier of distance with the bold claim that Jesus, the only Son, has made God known. He does so not merely by teaching about God, but by embodying God's very presence, character, and love. In Jesus, the heart of God is laid bare, not as a riddle, but as a relationship, not as a theory, but as a living reality. To know God, then, is to know Jesus. To see Jesus is to see the Father. To follow Jesus is to walk in the light of God's glory. The invitation is open. Come and see. The God you long to know is closer than you think, revealed in the face, the words, and the love of Jesus Christ.